Look, okay, sometimes it is me, but sometimes it's just you. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife, and today I am talking to you about some of the authors that I am going to be breaking up with. There's a couple of people on here that I have read a few books from them, and they just haven't worked. And if an author hasn't worked for me a couple of times, that's usually a sign for me that I need to let them go. If it's been a couple of books, if it's just been one book, if it's been three, if it's been five, sometimes you just know. First author on the list is somebody that might not come as any surprise, and that is Tessa Bailey. I've read maybe like 4 or 5 books from Tessa Bailey, and there's only been one that's worked for me, and that was It Happened One Summer. I think this is the only one of hers that I would genuinely go back to reread. I would genuinely go back to it. But any of the other ones just did not work for me. I don't like her dirty talk. I really don't like listening to Baby Girl in my ear 20 times in like 30 seconds. And My Killer Vacation, her book that came out in like summer of 2022, was just bananas, so weird. That I think that was the last book of Tessa Bailey's that I had read, and I just knew that it was time for us to say goodbye. I didn't even pick up the Secretly Yours or Unfortunately Yours books because I knew that that just wasn't something that was going to work for me. I haven't even looked at reviews, but her writing style hasn't done anything for me except for in It Happened One Summer, so I think that's a sign. Next up is Sophie Kinsella, and this one is a little bit of a weird one because we've had a kind of back and forth relationship. Some of Sophie Kinsella's books have worked so well for me. I think it's called My So-Called Life. That's my highlight of her books. I genuinely really loved that one. And then it all just went downhill from there. I really did not like the Fixer Upper or Fix Up or something like that. And I started the Confessions of a Shopaholic series maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I just could not connect with Becky at all. I found her really difficult to read. I found her a little bit strange. She had absolutely zero financial responsibility, which I know was the point of the story, but it was laughable how little financial responsibility she had. I know that Sophie also writes under her real name, which is Madeline Wickham. I haven't read any of her books under her real name, and I don't know if I'm going to even try them because I don't know how different they're going to be from her Sophie Kinsella books. I don't know if it's a totally different vibe. I don't know if it's a totally different genre. Maybe it is. I just don't think that her books are for me anymore. Somebody else whose books just might not be for me is Casey McQuiston. I tried Red, White, and Royal Blue when it came out, and I will admit that I was super hype about it. And I DNF'd it maybe after about 30 pages because it felt very kind of badly researched. There were a couple of references to the Prince of Wales not being who it is understood that the Prince of Wales would be. In this reality, the Prince of Wales was the second in line to the throne when it's the first in line to the throne. And I'm not a royalist in any way, but I felt like that was something that you really couldn't get wrong. Then I tried One Last Stop, and I found some of the scenes in there a little bit too incredulous for me. I know that they have got another YA book called I Kissed Shara Wheeler. I have got a copy of it from NetGalley, and I have tried to read it a couple of times, but it just hasn't really clung to me. My YA days seem to be over anyway, so unless Casey has got an adult book in their arsenal, I think we might have to say goodbye. Next up is Laura Jane Williams, and this one is genuinely just they don't work for me. I've listened to a couple of Laura Jane's books as an audiobook, and I have found the storylines to be a little bit strange. I have found the relationships to be a little bit kind of difficult for me to get on board with. And for me, that's the main point of a romance book. I need to believe in these characters being together. I need to see a really great start, I need to see a really great middle, and I need to really want for them to get together by the end of this book. But there were a couple of books of hers that I never really found that I was hoping that they would end up together. And usually if I have that a lot with an author, it's kind of a sign that their romance books might not be the thing I'm looking for. Next up is another one that won't be a surprise to frequent visitors here, and that is Abby Jimenez. I read The Friendzone when it came out, I think in maybe 2016, 2017, and I utterly despised it. It was the final maybe 25-30% of this book that brought it from a pretty solid 3.5 to 4 stars right down to a 1. I almost DNF'd it because I really hate the treatment of fertility, infertility, pregnancy at the end of this book. It was completely laughable how much of a 180 it did at the end of this book. Then I tried Part of Your World in maybe April of this year, and that turned out to be a pretty much of a success for me. So I thought, hey, maybe you know what? We haven't spoken in a couple of years. Maybe our lives are different now. Maybe things are different. And then my friend Michelle read Yours Truly, also by her, also in the same series as Part of Your World, and said maybe if you didn't like The Friend Zone for this specific reason, you're not gonna like Yours Truly. And I could not believe that she had gone back to the same thing over and over again. I could not believe that we were back here where we had been, what we were doing before, and I just knew that I could not go back to this author again. I just knew that there was something here that didn't work for me. Next up is truly an up or down situation, and I think we just have to leave it here, and that is Vari McFarlane. I have read, I think maybe 4 or 5 books by Vari McFarlane by now, and some of them have been hits, and more of them have been misses. I really did not enjoy If I Never Met You. I found the relationship really difficult, but also I don't enjoy when a white author writes characters of color, because that isn't our story to tell, that isn't our background to share. We aren't familiar with the struggles that people of color go through on a daily basis from a position of privilege of being a white person. So I found that something that just didn't sit with me. It didn't work for me. And then I read, I think it was called Between Us, the book that she wrote that came out last year, and that featured a relationship that mirrored the one that I had just left so vividly that I think I just left that book to the side and I didn't go back to it. Now, I do know that Vari has got another book coming out in September. I cannot remember the name of it, and I'm between two minds as to whether I will give it a go or not. I have got a copy from NetGalley. I was sent it from the publisher rather than requesting it. I don't know if I'm going to go into it or not. I think it might just be a one last hurrah. If I do go into it, it might just be let's just leave it here, say goodbye, spend one last weekend together, and then go our separate ways. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do. I will think it over, but what do you think I should do? Another author who I think I've given maybe 2 goes to is Chloe Leese. It's the writing style this time. It genuinely is just the writing style. I found her books to be so slow paced. And the second book that I had read was a retelling of Much Ado About Nothing, which I thought that I would really enjoy because I really like reading about Shakespearean retellings. I really like reading books that are kind of set in the world of Shakespeare. I really love a lot of Shakespearean retellings as movies. For example, 10 Things I Hate About You, one of my favourite movies of all time. The Baz Luhrmann version of Romeo and Juliet, also one of my favourite versions of all time. But there was just something about Much Ado About You that I didn't enjoy. And also when I had read Only If It's Us, which is the first book of the Bergman Brothers series, I felt like there were a couple of misrepresentations of some things. I felt like the misrepresentation of Swedish culture was a big thing. I really would have loved to see that done a little bit more. Also, there was a character who was deaf and mainly mute, and I felt like there wasn't a whole lot done from my perspective, that it could have been fleshed out a little bit better. Overall, it just didn't work for me as a book. Her writing style didn't work for me. So that was pretty much a sign to say goodbye. A recent author that I've decided to say goodbye to is Ali Hazelwood. All of her books are exactly the same. And I can't keep reading the same book with a different color anymore. I cannot keep reading a story about a man who is 110 foot tall and then he meets a woman who is about the size of your thumb, and they get together and they hit it off and they hate each other and they work in academia, which is great. I love seeing books that are set in academia. I love reading about women who work in STEM. It's something that we should definitely celebrate. But we have got to do something different about these relationships. We have got to get over a height difference. I just feel like it's too formulaic for me right now. I need something from her that's a little different. If I read a book of hers in the future and it's completely different and there's no mention of a height difference at all and we don't even know what height these people are, then maybe I'll give it a try. But for me, for now, I cannot keep reading the same book but with a different title. Finally, an author whose fiction and non-fiction I think I'm going to give a miss to is Matt Haig. I don't know if it's just a me thing, but I find some of his non-fiction books to be a little bit too much for me, and his fiction works have just generally not worked for me. The Midnight Library, I think I gave it 5 stars, but if I reread it again and went into it a little bit more critical, I probably would drop it down to about a 3, I think. When I was living and studying in the UK, I read How to Stop Time on a plane back to Ireland one Christmas, and it just didn't work for me. Even though I really like Shakespearean work, as I said, it just didn't work for me somehow. I found it a little bit clunky. I found it a little bit incredulous at times. So overall, I think Matt Haig and I are also probably going to say goodbye, even though some of the books it would pain me to do so. Those are some of the authors that I don't think you're going to find on these bookshelves again anytime soon. Are there any authors that you have decided that you're not going to read on any further? If you'd love to leave me a comment but you can't think of anything that you like to say, then just leave me the waving emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.